Welcome to the Group Answers Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Daniel. This is the weekly show designed specifically for pastors, disciple makers, group pastors, and small group leaders. Truly, we are created to help anyone with bottom line responsibilities for discipleship. Our goal is simple: to resource, train, and encourage you in the vital work of discipleship. This is the Group Answers Podcast. Let's do it. So welcome back to the Group Answers Podcast, and I am Brian Daniel. It's good to be with you again, and thanks for, I know when it comes to podcasts, you have lots of options. Thank you for choosing the Group Answers show today. And I would love to welcome back, and I do love to welcome back, Pastor Josh Smith, author and pastor. He is down there in God's country, Athens, Georgia. Josh, you guys don't know anything about college football down there, right? You just kind of tune that out.
We're learning a few things.
Josh is at Prince Avenue Baptist Church, and he is the author of Titus 10. Maybe you've heard of it. It is a book that has done really well for men's leaders, and the now available The Man for the Day, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. But Josh, welcome back to the show. Thanks for making time and being with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Excited to have another opportunity to talk to you.
So I just want to start with the Titus 10. Not to get into any numbers, but that was really successful. I think the word we use is traction, and traction, it has a lot to do with a lot of things, but one of those things is it resonates with people. Someone read it and they said, "Hey, this is a good book. I think you ought to read it too." So, what is it about that book and the corresponding Bible study you think has resonated with leaders and readers so well?
Well, no one's more surprised than I am at how well that's done. But I think, that book came out of, honestly, 15 years of experience of me just teaching that stuff. Like I just have been, as a local church pastor, as I said to you before we started, I've never loved men's ministry, but I love ministering to men. And so I've just done that just over the years, just men just have wanted to raise up men. And so that material in that book came out of me just figuring out how to do that for a lot of years. And so I think that shows in some way. I also think it's right place, right time. God's doing something in men right now. There's something really interesting happening. We can talk about that. But I just think that book kind of hit at the right time. So I'm really grateful how the Lord's blessed it. I believe in it. I love that stuff.
So talk about that nuance or that distinctive between men's ministry and ministering to men, and why that's so important in this context.
Yeah, I just think when you say men's ministry, every church I've ever been in, there's always one guy that just loves men's ministry. And you never know what they mean. I don't know if they want to go camping or have big game banquets or have forced, honesty and all that kind of stuff. So when I think of men's ministry, I don't get super excited. When I think of ministry to men, I can give my life to that and talk about it all day. So I do think a distinction there. I just think when you say men's ministry, things come to people's minds immediately that may or may not be what we're talking about.
I think a question I would have that's more broad, I think, is the way that I would put this. And the way that I would like to ask this is, if we were to drop a pin, to use today's parlance, if we were to put a pin right here where we are in 2026 in terms of ministering to men and men's discipleship, how would you describe this moment? I think some people use the term this cultural moment. How would you describe that?
Yeah, there's a lot of words. I mean, I think one word could be crisis, just in the sense of, when I first wrote the Titus 10, one of the things they told me is, hey, just to be clear, books for women sell, books for men don't sell. Don't get your hopes up. Like, nobody's going to buy this book. But I think what happened was pastors are waking up to the reality that they can't ignore the men in their church any longer. I think that's happening. So I think pastors are going, wait a minute, I have to do something because the men in our church are dying. So I think that's happening with pastors. I think men too are growing weary of feeling like it's wrong to be a man and wrong to talk about manhood. And I think too, we're seeing what happens in a culture, in churches and families when men aren't being what they're supposed to be and doing what they're supposed to be. So I think there's some awareness all of a sudden of, hey, we need men. And so I think it seems to me that's the moment we're in, just kind of a new awareness. Wait a minute, we can't ignore this any longer. We got to figure out something. We've got to do something with the men in our church.
All right, you kind of touched on it, but I want to ask you to go just give us a little bit more and expand on it. But Um, so over the course of your ministry, how have you seen this part of the life of any church evolve? The
Yeah.
church's ministry to men. Walk us through just what you've experienced and what you've experienced in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, when I first got into pastoral ministry, I would say, Wild at Heart was huge. So that book was just massive, and everybody was reading it. And I think it kind of started a movement among men, which was fine. And then I think after that, that changed to more of a Mark Driscoll approach, which really felt like every man's an idiot. Nobody's doing good enough. I don't think that bore the fruit that we wanted it to. The tone of that was really interesting. I think what's happening now is we're seeing a desire for some biblically sound, just solid foundations for what does it mean to be a man according to the word of God. How does God define manhood? Not the inner desires that I have or anything like that. Just like, what does God say about manhood? And that's where I think there was a something missing. And I think where the Lord's used the Titus 10 is just kind of to hopefully in some ways, and there's a lot of other books out there that do probably much better at this than I do, but that's what I was trying to answer. I was just trying to answer biblically, what are the foundations for manhood? And so that's what I'm seeing now, a desire for depth and maybe some seriousness, some thoughtfulness. Um, so I think that's why that's resonating.
Is there more to be said about seriousness and thoughtfulness in that respect? I mean, those are words that I think everyone understands, but when I hear you say it, I'm like, so. I mean, so over the course of how
Mhm.
we've seen this evolve, those stopovers were not. So it seems like, is it a more biblically based, or is it a more like thoughtful approach in some sort of mashup in all of these
Yeah, I
things?
don't know. Those books, those movements that we taught, they were helpful in a lot of ways, and God uses different things at different times. I do feel like the crisis of manhood right now has demanded something more foundational, something just like biblical. Like here's just the basics. Here's the foundations of being a man. We have to start from the beginning. Manhood is so misunderstood and so neglected. And we've been afraid in the last 10 years to even talk about manhood, it seems to me. So I think there had to be a little bit of thoughtfulness and seriousness that wasn't, maybe necessary prior. And I think too, I think tone is a very significant word. So what I feel like I write with this conviction that most men already feel like they're not doing a good job in almost every area of their life. So I write out of that conviction. Most men feel defeated. They feel discouraged. They know they're not doing very well. They don't know what it means to be a faithful man in any area of their life. And so the tone I want to write with is not to make that feeling worse, but to encourage, to exhort, to really give a vision for, man, God has something good for you if you'll step into it. So I want to write with a tone that I think fits the need of the moment. And those tones change in the moments and according to the movement of what God's doing.
Yeah, and for the record, I agree with you. I just as I hear you say that, I'm thinking, all right, so what do we mean by that? I'm just thinking to myself, and here's the way that I would unpack it. I think up in maybe in the recent trends, let's say recent being like over the last 15 or 20 years, couple of decades of what we're talking about. Maybe the word I would use is anecdotal. It's like somebody throws something out there and it's almost like some words or some phrases that we adopt and we just move forward with that. And we don't double click on that and ask ourselves, so what do we mean? And I think when we say thoughtfulness, it's the opposite of flippancy or something that's anecdotal. So, but that leads me to like my next question for you is, what I hear a lot of times in this context when we're talking about men's discipleship or ministry to men is it's hard to sustain that energy. And so we're all familiar with the funnel approach, and you have the big event and that funnels into groups, and there's a place for that. But a lot of times we throw that out there and say, well, that is our ministry to men, is whatever we're talking about there. But then it loses energy over time, and there's leadership and people get frustrated and burned out. And that's what I've heard about Promise Keepers was it didn't have the follow through. It was a big emotional event, and then it was not sustainable. What have you found in terms of sustainability, how would you unpack that? Because I think it has something to do with what you've already said, but I would just ask that question: is what kinds of things have you found most helpful in sustaining a men's discipleship continuum?
Yeah, I mean, what you said is true of any church program, right? When you come out big and announce it from the pulpit, and then it starts big, it usually dwindles. So here's a conviction of mine, and this is based upon just doing this for a while and focusing on men. I think the reason most pastors don't like to invest in men is because it's not quick.
Uh,
It's really a long process. Like it's the Eugene Peterson, it's a long obedience in the same direction. Like there's nothing quick about investing in men. I would say this is true of all discipleship, but I just feel like men in particular, you can invite them to a big event and they're going to come. But if you want to develop men, it's going to be slow and thoughtful. And you have to be willing as a pastor or as a layman to say, I'm willing to do this for the next 15 years and just see what it produces. Because if a pastor or any layman in the church will just decide, I'm going to take 10 guys. I mean, this is how the Titus 10 started. I'm going to take 10 guys. I'm going to invite them to come with me for 10 weeks, and we're going to talk about 10 aspects of manhood. Well, that's only 10 at a time. And I think for a lot of pastors, that feels not significant. But if you do that for a few years, that is significant. And then all of a sudden you start to cultivate a group of men in your church that are not only like love you and with you, but they're committed to the Lord and they're understanding what it means to walk with the Lord and discipling others. And I mean, in my first church I pastored, I just did this 10 at a time over and over. And by the time I left, I'd taken 120 men personally through this. Well, that's significant for a church of any size. Like the 120 men would have been invested in purposefully. So I just, again, I think it's difficult because a program doesn't necessarily work. What works is just being committed to investing in men over and over. And I'm doing it again now. I tell people I'm doing this revolutionary thing, and you should write this down. I've chose 12 men this year, and and I'm investing in them for a year. But I mean,
I knew what was coming.
That's right. Even, I mean, I'm at a significantly larger church now, but I still think I have a response. And we have Titus 10 groups going everywhere, and tons of people are leading those. I'm not leading those, but I'm doing something with some leaders in our church because I just think that's always my responsibility.
What I'm hearing you say is there's no moment in a ministry to men to where you say, "Man, I'm glad that's over with." I think that's our attitude a lot of times is you're able to check that box.
Yeah.
And move on to another thing. And men's discipleship is a box that either you never check off or you continually check off.
Yeah.
So
I think that's true. Yeah.
In terms and in this respect, and I think there's a lot of listeners out there that, for reasons we've already articulated, that struggle with this kinds of thing, that with this ministry for those reasons. But along the way, what have you picked up are some of the pitfalls? Like, I hate to use the word mistakes, but missteps or getting a little off course that you've seen leaders make. I would dare say one of those is maybe giving up on it because it's a long play and it's something that we want to end or to see some closure at some point, when really that's not the case. And like you said, it's not like that's any different from any other ministry, but it does seem like in some of the more programmatic things that we do, there are waypoints along the way where you can say, all right, phase 1, phase 2, whereas in this one, maybe not so much. So like, does that sound right? Is that accurate?
Yeah. I mean, I could probably write a book on pitfalls because I've done them all. Like I've made tons of mistakes in the midst of this, but I think one of the pitfalls, and we think about this with every ministry, but is thinking that big event or whatever, the rallying moment for the guy that's it. I've invested in men, and we do those. Like we have a monthly men's breakfast that we do. We have a few hundred guys that come to that every month. But we view everything in these like concentric circles. Like we have these outer circle, and we see those in we want to keep moving guys closer and closer and closer and closer to intimacy.
That's great.
So like,
yep.
We're always moving men. Like I have 4 daughters and 1 son. I met a family one time at an event that have 5 sons. And I said, I don't know how you do it. Like I have 1 son. I can't imagine how you do have 5 sons. And they go, oh, sons are easy. You just like, you treat them like dogs, like in the sense of you take them outside, you lock the door and let them run for 3 hours and then they come home exhausted. You just keep them moving. And I think I've realized with men, that is the key. Like you keep them moving. Like
Hmm.
an event is great, but what's next? Like you got to give them the next thing. So, if a guys are going through a Titus 10 group, well, the next thing is you lead a Titus 10 group. Like I think so. I think one of the pitfalls is we we're not moving men. Like we're giving them one thing to do, and then we're not giving them a next thing to do. And I don't think it needs to be overly complicated. It just needs to be the next step is you get in a group, you start a group, you find 3 guys or 4 guys, whatever it is. But I think the pitfall is to think that some event is going to be men's ministry, and it's not.
It seems like, Josh, one of the things that you're talking about is building an environment. That an environment is important in that context. It's almost like world building, and then it's this world you're creating that you're moving men through. That we need to think in terms of context and environment instead of like points on a map.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then create motion within that.
Yeah. I think that's true. I had an interview a couple of weeks ago about this new book, and they let me see it before they just recorded it, and then they wrote an article about it, and they let me see it and before they printed it. And I just wanted to change one word. I had said, don't overthink it. And I realized that's not true. You need to overthink it probably, but don't overcomplicate it is the word I would have rather used. So it does take a lot of thought, but I don't think ministry to men needs to be overcomplicated. And that's the hard part of it in a sense. Like what does it mean? Well, it starts with me as a pastor just investing in some men and then encouraging those to invest in other men. Like I don't feel like there's any secret to this. It's just not easy and it's not hard. I mean, it's not quick. And but there's a simplicity to this. And I don't think we need to overcomplicate this. We need people in the church investing in men for long periods of time. And that was the goal of the Titus 10, that book would allow guys to get in a group together and spend some weeks together having conversations, and then it would just reproduce.
That's a good segue into talking about the book. This next project, which is not next at this point, it's available anywhere that you buy books, and the title is A Man for the Day, and it's on the life of Elijah. Josh, what is it about the life of Elijah that particularly resonates with you and that you find helpful to teach to other men? And also, if you would, what's the backstory of the title? I'm interested in that too, as well.
Yeah, this book kind of started backwards. So it started with the title. About 25 years ago, probably now, I read a Spurgeon sermon. And in that sermon, he said, "Here is the day for the man, but where is the man for the day?" So he said, "It is now as it was in the Reformers' day. Like men are needed. Decision is needed. Where is the man for the day?" And so what happened was Spurgeon was looking at the culture around him saying, "Hey, we need men." And he was looking at the church in front of him and going, "Where are they?" So now's the day for the man, but where's the man for the day? So I wrote the title like, I want to develop men for the day, like men for right now. And as I began to think about that, I was already doing a study of Elijah for our men's ministry, our monthly Bible study. And the more I thought about Elijah, who's always been one of my favorite Bible characters, I thought, man, this was the guy that was like, he was used in his moment, specifically for his moment, doing exactly what God called him to do. His struggles were so real. His surrender, his courage, all of those things were just so good. And so the more I studied his life, the more I thought this would be a really great way to discern what does it mean to be the man God's called me to be today. And so we start with surrender. Like, what does it mean to become a surrendered man? And just kind of mark by mark, it's kind of a little bit like the Titus 10. It's 10 different things, surrender, preparation, direction, just different things. But it's not necessarily a follow-up to Titus 10. Like, you don't have to read the Titus 10 to read this. It's totally independent. But to me, it was answering the next question. So if Titus 10 was a foundation, the man for the day is, all right, I want to start building a life that matters. Like, I want to be today the man that God's called me to be. And so it came out of that heart, me looking at the men in our church going, all right, let's don't think about the man we don't want to be someday. Let's just become the man God wants us to be today.
Does the man for the day change from historical period to era, to different context? Or is it, I mean, the Bible's unchanging, right? And the Bible's call to masculinity and manhood is unchanging.
Yeah.
But context changes. How do you account for that, or do you?
Well, so I think that the 10 principles that are here, the 10 words that come out of being the man for the day are taking from Elijah and applied today. So massively different context. Well, not massively different context. There's a lot of similarities. But the truth is, I think all of those 10 words apply to what that means. But if we will kind of follow through with this and surrender as a part of our life and preparation and direction, all those are part of our life, we'll be able to discern, I think, in that moment, and what are the times and what do we need for the times. My heart is to develop men from the inside out. So we don't want to develop from the outside in. We're not trying to just change men from the outside. We want men to become different from the inside. So if we can get the right things inside, they'll be able to discern what needs to happen around them. So I think they're, universal kingdom principles here that apply to any culture in any setting.
So if you were to talk directly to group leaders right now, and with this in mind, what do you tell them about how to manage these groups, and what are the challenges that you're seeing that are out there in front of us, and how to navigate those?
Yeah, there's two different ways I talk to guys. So by God's grace, I think because of the Titus 10, I get a lot of calls and emails about how to do things like this. And so the first thing I say is just start something. First of all, just start. Let's get going. Let's start doing something. There's two ways I encourage churches to do this. One could be some type of event or some type of monthly event, whatever, that is purposefully towards moving men into a small group. But small groups are the answer. Like groups of, I'm doing a group of 12 right now, groups of 10 work, but groups of 4 or 5. And so all I'm doing is trying to find a few leaders in our church that will take a book like this, and they don't need a ton of preparation. They'll read a chapter a week and they'll get together and talk. And then at about week 7 out of 10, they'll start having discussions about what it means to do this next and what guys will take the next group. Everything I write for the purpose of being done in some small group. A guy can read it individually. That's fine. But I say explicitly in the Titus 10, you're welcome to read this alone, but it was not written for that. I'm writing for guys to talk together, to meet together and then continue to multiply. And by God's grace, that's what we're seeing. So, but again, that's where I think in a church, we think I want to do something big. What I would say is don't worry about the big right now. Get 2 or 3 groups that are meeting, that are talking, and then just see how they multiply.
I think I would just speak to the group leaders. I think a lot of the challenges here is, okay, I don't mind inviting men into a conversation, but then what? When they show up,
Yeah.
then what? I think what Josh is saying is he's got the then what. Titus 10, and I think context is a good word. Titus 10 creates a context for a robust discussion that moves men along a continuum. And it sounds like the man for the day does the same thing.
Yeah, it was intended to start conversation. Absolutely. It was
Yeah.
intended to not forced accountability. That's one of the things I've hated about men's ministry in the past, but let's just start talking and see if week 3 or week 4, the walls start coming down and guys start being honest. And I write and have usually questions or thought-provoking statements at the end in order to make that happen. Like that's always my goal. Guys getting together in groups, having discussions about what it means to be a man.
When I've done that in the past, Pastor, I haven't had any problem with people saying, no, that sounds like a terrible idea and I'm not going to do that. If you invite men into a conversation, it's been a very favorable response.
Well, and that's why I think we talked about the Titus 10, why it did well. I think it's time and place. Right now, men are hungry. I've never seen a moment like this that where men are more hungry. They're dying. Very few times does anybody turn down the opportunity to be in a group like this. Like they are just dying. And so, yeah, I think what's hard and complicated is you just said, well, what do we do with them? Well, that's why I've written these 2 books so that you'll know what to do with them. That's the hard part. But just inviting some guys in, and there's not a lot of guys that are gonna say no to that. Men are really eager to change.
And while this isn't a commercial for the Titus 10 or the man for the day, I'm happy to say that there are formatted Bible studies. Well, for the man for the day, it's TBD. It's not available yet, but it is for Titus 10. And so, it's not just a book. And so there is a, for lack of a better term, a script, some material that can be used. And you said groups 4 or 5. Tell me a little bit about like what's ideal about 4 to 5. So Like, is because we talk, there's one on one, which is a lot different. Triads, not so different. And then you've got your bigger groups that is like, I would say 8 to 12, and then beyond that. What is it about 4 to 5 that you like?
I'm not a one-on-one is not my thing. So that's just personal. Like a lot of guys are good at that. The other part of that I would say is too, I think the one-on-one can be super great and helpful in some contexts. But what I would say to most guys, if you're going to invest this much time, get 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 guys in there. And one of the reasons that's important too, we found, I mean, we have a ton of college students at our church because we're right here at University of Georgia. So our college students are longing to be in groups with older men. I mean, just like they're requesting. They don't want to be at a table when we do this. They don't want to be at a group with all college students. They want to be with older men. So I think that's important. So one of the things I learned 15 years ago doing Titus 10 groups is if I can get a couple of guys in their 80s and 20s and 30s and 40s, those groups become dramatically different. So I say 3 to 4. My ideal is somewhere closer to 7, 8,
Ah,
probably got 7 to 10 guys. That's probably my ideal. And just because it allows for more experience, more conversation, some mature guys to be able to speak. I just think it allows guys to open up a little bit more, and I like that size. I mean, I don't know if it matters. Some of that may just be personal preference, but I do know that when you're talking about manhood, I feel like groups between 5 and 10 are better than the one-on-one.
yeah. Well, like you said, one on one is a different. It's a different. That's a different environment.
Yeah.
I would like 4 to 5 for that person that can't be there, and so invariably you're gonna have 1 or 2 people, so you always have 3.
Yeah.
7 or 8, maybe the same, but you're right. I think some of it depends on where you're meeting too. But I just thought I would ask because you said 4 to 5 because I think
Yeah.
that's. But you're right. I think. Would you agree that hey, just start? Let's not get bogged down in the number of people. Let's whatever's comfortable for you. If it's you and 2 buddies, do it.
That's why I say don't overcomplicate it. Just
Yeah, don't
let's get started.
overcomplicate it. So a lot of people don't know that your dad, Bailey Smith, is a well-known pastor and evangelist and former Southern Baptist Convention president, and of course has been very formative in your discipleship. Um, I would just, what did you pick up from your father that you would pass on to men out there that may be listening that are also dads?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't even know if I knew how formative he was until the second book, The Man for the Day. I found myself
Oh
rethinking.
wow,
I feel like, I mean, I mentioned him in the first book a little bit, but I feel like in this second book, there was more and more things that the Lord was bringing up. I tell some really neat stories about him, but I think for him, it was more what I saw than what was purposefully taught. He was gone a lot. He was an evangelist. When he was home, he was present. It was great, but he traveled a lot. I mean, he was gone a lot. But man, my dad, I say in the Titus 10 that my dad didn't know how to change oil or fix a transmission or kill a deer or clean a deer or any of those things. But he was the manliest man I ever knew. And I think it's just because of his character. My dad had a lot of courage. Had a lot of courage. He was really faithful. He really just hung in there for a long time and continued to do what he thought was right. And so I think just watching him, I appreciate it the older I get, the way in which he, cared for us and the way in which he demonstrated a lot of, I mean, courage is kind of the word that I keep going back to. But I have a chapter in this book on The Man for the Day called On Anger. And it was the hardest chapter I wrote, but the one I think if I could just have one chapter go out there independently, it'd probably be this one. But I talk about my dad who had a lot of fire in him and a lot of righteous, holy, good anger. My dad was bothered by sin. He was bothered by lostness. He was bothered by dysfunction. And I tell a story about that in there. But my dad, in a very positive way, was a bothered man, like in a good way. I don't see enough men that are bothered anymore. They're not bothered by sin. They're not bothered by what's happening in culture. They're not bothered by what's happening in dead churches. My dad was bothered by those things. I think the things that bothered God bothered my dad, which I appreciate.
So that's how you would set up the difference between a worldly anger and a righteous anger. I read a book years ago. The name of it was Allender and Tremper Longman.
Yeah.
Cry of the Soul.
Yeah.
And they in that book, and they work out the sinful side of emotion and the redemptive side of emotion, and anger is one of them. And another good chapter they do is lament versus despair. But I remember that worldly anger versus I think they called it selfish anger. versus a righteous anger. So that's how you work that out is in the book, and you do address that. That's a great chapter.
Yeah, Pallison wrote a book too that's called Good and Angry. It comes out of that same kind of stream, but it was the hardest chapter. And when I just turned in the manuscript for the Bible study curriculum, it was really hard to put that chapter into 3 short little daily Bible studies because it's hard to. I mean, there's nothing more destructive to a family or a church or a culture than angry men, like sinfully angry men. There is nothing more damaging. And I've dealt with a lot of families that have dealt with that. But what I'm saying about anger is if it bothers God, it should bother you. So we want to be bothered by what bothers God. And the other thing I say on the anger chapter, and then we need to respond in a godly way. So those 2 things, what bothers God must bother me, and I must respond in a godly way.
If I asked you to get into a little bit this notion of sinful anger and how destructive that is, how would you categorize that? Like, where's it coming from, and where do you see it most often? What are the either internal or external instigators of that kind of posture?
Sure. Well, the Bible is clear that anger does not produce the righteousness of God. So anger doesn't produce righteousness. So nothing good comes out of sinful anger. Nothing. I think this is a huge, this may be another podcast, but the truth is, I think a lot of men, I already said this, but I want to say it again. A lot of men are walking around with a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of hurt, a lot of feeling defeated in so many areas of their life. And I think what happens is that constant sense of inner frustration and guilt, all of that sometimes explodes in unrighteous anger. And so this is the reason why my commitment is to develop men from the inside out. Like fixing the anger problem is one thing, but fixing where it comes from is another. And I feel like I'm surrounded by a generation of men who feel really defeated and really discouraged and have almost given up. And that's why I'm so committed to writing with a tone that feels like I love you and I want to exhort you and there's something better for you. And also getting to the heart of the issue that your soul needs to be healthy. So I'm very committed to helping guys get a healthy soul. And hopefully that's evident, particularly in the Man for the Day.
That's really good, Pastor. We don't have time for the podcast, but guess what? There is a book, The Man for the Day. It's a great segue, right? Available now. Good. Again, it's not a commercial, but Josh has done good work for a part of our world that needs this kind of addressing. So, Pastor, just again, I'm appreciative for your obedience in writing the book. And that's Pastor Josh Smith, author and senior pastor at Prince Avenue Baptist Church there in God's country, Athens, Georgia. Thanks for being with us today, Pastor. And I know you've got a lot going on, so it's good to see you again. And good luck with everything.
Brian, thanks so much. I'm grateful for you and the work you're doing. Keep it up.
This episode of Group Answers Podcast was brought to you by our team, executive producer Angie Elkins, producer Nikki Ogden, edited by Donnie Gordon. All episodes are recorded at my personal studio in Evergreen, Colorado with the help of Riverside FM. Artwork by Lauren Urban. And I'm your host, Brian Daniel. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Group Answers Podcast.